and then we just get going and have a space to be present, to be available, to listen. I think listening to each other, but sometimes we overlook listening to ourselves, be able to listen to ourselves and listen to what is the deepest truth inside ourselves, what is the medicine that could be valuable for others in the space, and being curious, being open, being available. Um, we've been talking about the inner adventure, being open to the inner adventure, and seeing what opens up inside us, and being available for whatever new vistas we're here to discover and explore and open inside us, and recognizing that can change and shift in our external life as well. So let me give you a couple quick announcements. We're heading to Atlanta tomorrow. We're doing breath work and concert with John and Kathy Stringer, something we've done quite a few of over the years. We haven't been back in Atlanta doing an event in I don't know, seems like a year or two or something. So really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be really, really special. First breath work with John and Kathy in Atlanta with Joa, baby Joa, as our additional facilitator. So looking forward to that. And then we have a 1 day retreat here at our place, Saturday, November 16th, um, which we had our first one the day of the hurricane. So it was a smaller group than expected. Some of you guys were here though. It was really sweet. And we're going to do a second one here. Really loving to open up this property and this space. There's a real kind of sanctuary of serenity and peace and connection to nature and kind of the intelligence of nature that is present here. Um, so really looking forward to that. We have New Year's retreat coming up, which we've been doing annually, and personal sessions are going as well. So if anyone's interested in personal sessions, you can let me know. Patreon to support what we're doing here is definitely greatly appreciated. There's a chat box here to share in the chat if you want to type in. You can raise your hand, your digital hand, or your physical hand if you want to speak and share. The intention of the group is somebody asked me last time. They're like, "Yeah, that was really cool. What was it? What's it about?" After they were like here the whole time. So the intention is to support humanity to transcend human suffering and to thrive physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. That's the intention. So I had a lot of different ideas about things percolating, popping up to share and explore tonight. And then I had this question that came to me, right? This was literally like 5, 10 minutes from, earlier. And it's like to support humanity to transcend human suffering, to support ourselves to transcend human suffering. And then I had this question, is everything we do to support ourselves to transcend human suffering? And I was like, I think that's a great question. Are we doing what we're doing to support ourselves to transcend human suffering? And so that's a question I wanted to throw out to you guys to look at and to explore. And is it like, are we doing that consciously? Probably not. Are we doing it unconsciously? Quite possibly, right? Like if you smoke a cigarette, are you doing that to transcend human suffering? Probably. If you drink a beer, are you doing that to transcend human suffering? Probably. If you um, try to go out on a date, if you watch porn, if you uh, go on vacation, if you try to get a new job, if you're trying to make more money, if you're trying to get a new house, if you're trying to buy a new shirt, it's like all the things that we're doing, are we doing them for what reason? Most of the things we're doing, unless you're a psychopath, which I think that does exist, right? So I was thinking, okay, well, those are people that are trying to intensify human suffering and create more human suffering, right? But I don't think those people are on the call with us live tonight. So I think that what we're doing consciously or unconsciously to transcend. Wow, big group coming in tonight. This is awesome. Appreciate y'all being here. We're doing to transcend human suffering. So I wanted to look into that and think about, are we approaching the intention of transcending human suffering, our personal suffering? Are we approaching it in an intelligent way? Right? It feels like that's the primary question. Are we approaching it in an intelligent way that is grounded in wisdom, or are we kind of going for like a short-term fix that's going to make things worse in the long run? Are we exploring deeply what are the causes and what are the roots of of suffering in a way that we can transcend it over the long term, right? And do we even feel like that's possible? Is that something that's even like a potential for us and possible for us? And what happens if a group is exploring that together, exploring that question together? It feels like something really exciting and amazing can arise from that shared inquiry together. So I wanted to open it up to you guys and catch your reflections or your thoughts on that. Is that something that you notice in your life or you notice in people's lives around you that is something that's being inquired into in an intelligent way and like progress is being made? I think this is like the essence of the spiritual journey, right? Or the journey of awakening. Or is it something that um, progress is not being made, or is it something where there's regression happening? Um, yeah, questions, thoughts, reflections, insights, all you beautiful people that I'm looking at right now from all different backgrounds and places. And I think there's a lot that you could add to the conversation. I'm going to start with Will. You, Will, your reflections on this topic. Did you just disappear? Looks like he's gone. Okay, so then I guess I won't start with you, Will. That's an interesting thing, with like speaking about like inquiring into suffering is like one of the biggest things is things not going the way you planned, or things not going the way you anticipated, or things not going the way you think they should go, or things going, um, yeah, different than the choice that you want to make. And I think that's a big challenge for us as humans because we have this sense of autonomy and we have this sense of the way we want things to go as an individual. And then we're in this big universe where things don't go the way we think they should go. And then it's even the question of why do we even think we know the way that we think they should go? Why do we even think we know what's the best way for things to go? Right. So I think a lot of it is a space of humility, of learning um, through life that being open and being humble and being in the space of not knowing is actually a place of deeper intelligence that allows you to align with the intelligence of the moment, to align with the power of now, as Eckhart Tolle would say, to align with God's will, as we could call it. So yes, Robin, come on in and share.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I can't speak for everybody, but I definitely think that just about everything I do personally is motivated. I don't think of it as to transcend suffering. I think of it as to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I, have there's always the temptation to do something that might feel good in the short term, but it might not make you feel good in the long term. So, yeah, I definitely, I'm an artist, and um, I love to paint things that make me feel happy and that I enjoy, but it's also very important to me that other people enjoy it. I mean, because it's a communication. And I think if I was painting things that were just for me, I personally wouldn't enjoy it as much. So I do care about uh, pleasing other people too.
Yeah, that speaks to our interconnection, right? It's like there is definitely something about the interconnection of empathic, energetic um, network that we're a part of. And when people are, um, hate to use these simplistic terms, but feeling bad, then we can feel it. And when they're feeling good, we can feel it. So there is a sense of like other people's well-being affects our well-being and vice versa. But then it gets more interesting because it's like, well, if everybody's well-being is affecting my well-being and um, it's like your authentic truth can get compromised because you want to make somebody feel good as opposed to being aligned with what's true inside yourself. So that's another area where it gets kind of gets interesting. Come on in, Ryan. That's where it gets interesting to explore and to look at that. I think we're whoa, crazy echo happening there. Um, yeah, this question of like if there's something that's true inside myself and if I share it, it's going to make other people feel upset or feel angry or feel. Now, I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of my mind's going like, I think that's what's going to happen here. It's like, do I be true to myself and be aligned with that, or do I um, not be aligned with my truth or to make people feel good? Does that make sense? I just got to say, there's more people here tonight than ever, and I'm like me talking and also trying to moderate all these different things is a little bit of a challenge. So I think next time I'm going to have somebody help out with the tech stuff here. But just wanted to say bear with me on that. Yeah, Bethany. Oh, I think you're muted.
No, it's Bethany's.
What's that? Did you want to talk, Bethany? I see your hands up.
I don't think we can hear her.
Okay. Yeah, we can't hear you. Okay. Was that you, Jacob?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
I know Kissney's wanting to talk.
Disney, please share. Please
Sorry,
share.
friends. I was having a time with the mute unmute situation and all that, but we'll figure it out. Interested to hear what Bethany had to share. I hope that you figure out your audio connection or something. But on the level of like appeasing something within, whenever we seek all of these things, I think there is definitely something to be said, like Robin pointed out about it being a short-term appeasement versus a longer term. And I think that the more that we deepen into a space of what's really serving us and what's really serving humanity and, our fellow folk, um, the easier it gets to, you know, trying to appease the right thing. You know what I mean? Not just to satiate something in the moment, but if you realize, hey, this isn't going to do it for me long term, like this bag of Doritos might be tasty, but I'm not going to enjoy myself, immediately after or whatever. Um, Definitely something like you can get in there, you know? That's like
Viewing the short term versus the long term and learning, that's kind of like maturity, right? Is like learning to think of the long term versus the immediate um, satisfaction of the moment.
yeah, and also whenever we're like trying to make other people feel good, are we trying to like I don't know, appease an egoic need or just like make everything feel smooth and peaceful in the moment, or sometimes like difficult conversations that make you and someone else uncomfortable are like sometimes the necessary and most full-hearted thing to do in that moment. And that may not be making everybody feel good at the moment, but it can lead to a deeper good feeling place.
It leads to a deeper sense of potentially of a deeper sense of intimacy, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. So I think yeah, it's like there's like transcending suffering. It's like, does that just mean having one emotion all the time without having any other emotions? I don't think that's actually the case. I think as you go deeper on this journey, it's like what we could call emotional intelligence, right? It's like being able to be with, it's almost like you're free to be with whatever emotion arises. That would be the deeper layer of transcending suffering. It's not like I'm trying to have this emotion and not have any other emotions. It's like I'm available to feel any emotion that's present. And I think when someone's in that space, there's a feeling like this person's really present with me. Like they're really listening to me. It feels like they care, basically, because they're available to whatever emotion is arising without trying to run from it or avoid it, but also not being attached to it either. So it's like the transcending of the suffering is like um, almost like having, this is kind of a provocative way to say it, but it's almost like having no relationship with emotion. So it's like you're just free, there's a freedom in being available to whatever emotion is present without clinging to it or without trying to stay away from it. And I think being able to do that, to go to what you were sharing, Kissney, that's what allows you to have deeper, intimate friendships, relationships, connections with people, because you can be present for um, uncomfortable feelings that arise. And in that presence, there's a sense of like you're still together, you're still there with each other, you're still um, yeah, you're still in the moment with each other, and then you're able to go deeper on the journey together, and I think deeper into yourself, right? Because if you're always afraid of your emotions, then you can't. You're kind of on the surface of the. It's like being on the surface of the ocean. You're on like the waves, but you don't go down to the bottom, the deeper the ocean, because you're always kind of like running from the different emotions, you know. So it's like, is there a part of you? Is there an essence of yourself that's deeper than just the emotional movement that's happening, right? It goes back to this question of like, who are you really? I was talking earlier today about the deepest, kind of the root question of all the other questions on the spiritual path is, who are you really? You know, so are you just like your emotions? Are you just someone that's like running and chasing emotions, or are you just your thoughts? Are you just your ideas of yourself, or are you something deeper than that? Will's back. Can you hear me, Will?
Yeah, sorry, I had a little
Okay.
technical
I
difficulties.
turned it over to you and you like disappeared. I was like,
Oh,
whoa.
for real?
Yeah,
My fault.
yeah. No, it's not your fault. But anything you want to share?
Was just enjoying what you were saying.
Yeah.
The yeah, no, I think I'm good for now. I was just appreciating the flow you're on.
Yeah, thank you. Bethany still has her hand up, but I don't know if we can hear you.
I don't know where to find my hand thing.
Hey,
And I don't
Jen.
know. Hey, I don't know
Go ahead.
how to
Go
a
ahead.
hand.
Go ahead and share. You don't have, you
Um,
guys don't have to necessarily like do the hand thing anyway. It's fine to
oh,
just talk.
that's good because I don't know how to do that. I have to
Unless,
figure that.
unless there's a whole bunch of people trying to talk at the same time, then we'll have to get it more, formalized. But
Well, yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to what you were saying, just about, transcending suffering. And gosh, I'm not going to remember exactly what you said, but what I gleaned from it, it's not like it's necessarily transcending, like overcoming something. It's more about understanding understanding the nature of suffering and what it is that we're experiencing, and
Yes.
being able to observe it from a sort of a neutral place, so we're not then reacting to the suffering to create more suffering like out there in the world. Because like if we're in a place of pain and suffering and we're reacting to it without just observing it, we end up causing other people harm, like not meaning to. It's our unconscious reaction to it.
mhm.
The more that we're able to like sit with it, understand it, observe it, and then respond to it from like a neutral place, we're creating more harmony, I think, in the world in general, within relationships, just within circumstances, within everything. And it's really freaking hard, honestly. Like, you know, I'm kind of jumping on, this is my first time on the call, so you guys have probably talked about, everything in the last month. But to not respond with, a lot of, pain is really, it's a very difficult thing to do. But if you're like spreading that pain, let's say, to family members or friends that are, not here in Asheville, they're they're feeling the pain, not having an opportunity to offer compassion. So it's like, if we're able to just, yeah, observe it versus like be in it, not of it, I guess, and not
Mm.
necessarily transcend, but to understand our suffering. This is kind of my thoughts on it.
Mhm. Understanding is definitely a good thing for sure.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying about like, I think that the idea that what people are doing, whether it's intelligently or not, is a way to transcend suffering. I think it actually, for me, I think it creates more compassion because if you're able to observe someone and see that they're trying their best to get through, being a human being, which is hard.
Yeah.
This is a hard class we all signed up for, So and sometimes like especially if it's someone that's younger, right? A lot of times we've already been through the lesson that they're trying to go through, so we kind of know that that doesn't work. But they don't know it, and they don't want to listen, so they got to experience it for themselves. They have to learn that, they have to go through that class, and
Yeah.
then vice versa for us. There might be things that the other people are already been through that we haven't been through yet. So we have to learn those lessons for ourselves. Um, so that's a good thing to keep in mind, and
Yeah.
be aware of. One other thing that is a good imagery or metaphor is like if you think of the ocean, so you think of the surface of the ocean, and that's like all the things that are moving and changing, and all the different emotions and feelings and ideas and thoughts and all the turbulence, and sometimes it's like kind of mellow, and sometimes it's like really stormy and really intense, and there's this depth deeper that we can lose awareness of, or maybe we don't have any awareness of at all, right? But if we go deeper inside ourselves, there is this stillness at the bottom, like kind of the ocean's floor. There is this stillness that is underneath the turbulence, underneath the waves. But it's all the ocean. So we're still aware, we're still connected to the surface, but we're grounded and we're rooted in the stillness of the ocean floor underneath the turbulence that's happening and that's coming and going. And as you deepen on the spiritual journey, you're more grounded and rooted in the stillness. And so, in the I am. I think that there's some point in the Bible where God says, I am that I am. Right. So you're more grounded in the I am, and then you are not, again, you're not like, oh, I don't want to feel any of that. You're able to feel it, but you're also able to be in the stillness at the same time. You're grounded in the stillness, you're connected to the surface, but you know that the surface is just a tiny level of the ocean. It's not everything. So you're not lost in the emotions. One of the things that we talk about is the being grounded in being versus doing, versus having to accomplish something versus having to get somewhere. And I think as you go deeper into the space together, there's this kind of natural relaxation into being, and there's less of a need to go somewhere else. So you want to go somewhere else physically sometimes, right? But even also mentally, you want to go somewhere else. And there's this sense of like you're kind of resting more in the moment without the need to go anywhere else. And so there's these kind of natural, I think we're naturally in communication. There's naturally, because I've been in like different cultures, been with indigenous people, and there's kind of a lot of times like these kind of like low tech cultures, there's more like space between words. There's more silence between words. And I think that is more the natural way, the more you're resting in being. So I say all that to say, like, if there's more space or there's more being and presence here in the conversation, that's natural, even though it's abnormal from the way we usually communicate in America.
I was having some technical difficulties still. Otherwise, I was inspired about the idea of the notion that love embraces all things.
Mm,
Like the yeah, like in our process of transcending suffering, we're not denying the pain. There's a great temptation to
mm.
deny it and push it away, but I don't think that that's really the movement. It's more of like embracing it, like our higher self embracing what feels like the more like harder aspects of our experience. But that line just really guides me, and I think it reminds me of like just all the emotional experiences that I've had. I find out that love was stronger than the pain.
Will got froze, looks like.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that distinction between pain and suffering is really key, which we haven't touched on yet. So pain is of the moment. So if I'm walking, I don't know why this image came to my mind, but if I'm walking and a coconut falls on my head, that will cause me pain. Um, and I think no matter how much, no matter how awake you are, or how enlightened you are, or how spiritually attuned you are, the body still has its functions. And pain is not a bad thing. That's another thing that's really important to keep mindful of, right? It's like this notion of pain is there to guide us and direct us. Pain is there to um, it's our internal guidance system. So like, the classic example is like if you put your if you're kind of like talking to somebody, you put your hand on the stove and it's like, oh, that hurts, that's hot. Well, that's God helping you, being like, hey, don't put your hand there, you're gonna lose your hand, you're gonna burn your hand off. Right. So the pain is there to just kind of guide us to move this direction or go that direction, or don't do that, do that instead. Um, so it's there to be something that's there to be listened to and inform us. And I think when we resist and we don't want to, we want to do it our way. We want to not listen to the guidance. That's where the suffering comes in. That's where there's this kind of like it goes beyond a moment of pain, which is just in the moment itself, to something that's more of a chronic condition, right? And so if we're in the chronic condition of suffering, then the interesting thing is a lot of times what you have to do, this is where it's very kind of like opposite the way you would think. A lot of times what you have to do is actually listen to the pain, right? I think those of you that have been there know that. Like you have to actually, it's like you've been avoiding the pain. So you avoiding the pain creates this chronic suffering, but the pain is actually there to give you a message. It's not there because, God hates you or wants to hurt you or doesn't like you or something like that. It's actually supportive. So it's like when you can listen to the pain. Also, people have a fear of listening to something that's pleasurable. That's scary for a lot of people. Listening to the pleasure, listening to the ecstasy, listening to the bliss. I find that's often more scary for people than the pain, right? So being able to listen to what's present without resistance um, is different than suffering, which is the opposite of that or suffering is the resistance to that space. So yeah, thanks for that, Will. I think you're back now. Rachel, did you want to share something?
Um, hang on. Um, yeah, I have a conundrum kind of rattling around in my mind.
Yeah.
I thought,
Let's take this out of the abstract and
yeah,
make it more
I
personal.
well, I thought that, we look at Jesus as the example of how to do this perfectly,
Hmm.
but I always thought of Jesus as having a life full of suffering. And he was persecuted a lot, like, and then crucified. And I even thought of him as like feeling a lot of the emotions too, like the anger of flipping the tables and the deep compassion and the
Hmm.
the crying for the death of his friend. And so I'm trying to think of like, well, I'm trying to figure out how this fits in with this conversation. Did he really not? Was this not really suffering that he was experiencing, more pain, or maybe it was all just to zoom out and see the bigger picture. That's why I experienced things that we did. I don't know. I'm a little. It's more a
Yeah, it's a great
question,
question.
I guess.
Different people definitely have a lot of different takes on it, for sure. I can give you my take, which is just my personal realization on it. So the first thing to recognize is the external. It's kind of like I was just saying about the ocean and also the pain, difference between pain and suffering. So there's these things happening on the surface, and then so if you take it to the ocean, there's these things happening on the surface, and then there's the depth of the ocean's floor, which is this stillness, this level of stillness. Okay, um, so the more that you awaken to this level of stillness, the more you transcend the world, but you're still a part of it. So it's like you're in the world, but not of it. So you're experiencing the world as a human being, but then there's this part of you that like it's not the core of you, really the root of you is not affected by it at all. So you're completely liberated, you're completely free, you're completely in communion with God, um, unconditionally, regardless of what happens. So my um, realization, which I talked about, I had this powerful experience with Jesus, right? So my realization is that's what Jesus is here to teach us, you know, to teach us how to realize that for ourselves. There's a line in the Bible where Jesus says, "He will do all of this and greater." A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that line, but that line is there. And I think that He, um, yeah, that's what he's here to show us. Now, the other thing that's interesting too, and this was really powerful for me because in the new age world, it's a lot of it's very ego based, where it's really like what's in it for me? What do I get out of this? Right? Um, and this experience with Jesus really blessed to be open to the sense of it's not about what's in it for me. It's about what's in it for all of you. Right? That's where Christ was coming from. He's like, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for all of you. So he's listening in every moment, like what's of the highest benefit? What's the greatest um benefit and gift to all beings? And Jesus is like, to be crucified on the cross. And he's like, what? Really? And he's like, yeah, really. And then he's like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it because I love the world so much. If that's really what's beneficial to everybody, and that's really what's going to get this message out, and that's really what's going to like open people up to the truth, the way, the life, and the truth, then I'll do it. And for me, that's the I guess the model you could say that I aspire to live by. Is living in that Christ-like light of of what is the highest benefit of all beings in each moment, and to like listen to God for what is that guidance. And it's different for each of us. It's unique to each of us in each moment. So we have to actually be actively listening, actively paying attention, and then actively follow the guidance, even when it seems like, unusual or strange or scary or whatever it feels like. Um, but in doing that, we're basically like deepening more and more into this like most unbelievable, incredible love. It's the more you deepen this unbelievable, incredible love, there's incredible freedom in that. This is a really interesting thing. Like, um, on the spiritual path, the feminine pursues. Now, this is a generalization, okay? So the feminine, which could be a man or a woman, but the feminine pursues love, and the masculine pursues freedom. And the thing that's so cool is like the deeper and deeper you go into freedom or love, they ultimately end up being the same thing. It's like, because when you give yourself completely to the world in love, you're also completely free. Does that make sense? So that's my best answer to that question.
Yeah, the highest freedom is to always love.
Exactly.
Like you can never be
Exactly.
shifted from it.
Exactly.
Mm,
But then we have to learn what love is, right? Like I think that's kind of why we're here, is to learn what love is.
true.
And love doesn't mean being nice. It could, but it could not, you know? So that's a whole interesting journey too, is like what is love? So that goes back to what you were saying, Rachel, of like, when you look at the gospels, like Jesus wasn't always nice, but he always was loving, right? It's like sometimes it's like the it's like we were talking about earlier. It's like you need to tell somebody something that emotionally they're not going to like in the moment, but it's best for them in the long run. So that's actually the loving thing to do, is to have that conversation or have that teaching, as opposed to just doing what makes you feel good in the moment. I think those of us who are parents, sometimes you have to tell your kids something that they're not going to like hearing, but you're doing it because you know that it's the right thing to tell them over the long run that's going to benefit them.
And you know what's unique about that, Brian, is that when you do that, you don't necessarily feel angry at them, even though you might be being stern. I think that that's an important part of love, is like a emotional equanimity, where we're coming from a place not of like blame or projection at all, you know, but
Mhm.
coming from love, which is like, the openness that embraces all of life unconditionally. It's some
Mhm.
quality of, freedom, and and it has its special touch, love is love. It's a frequency. It's like a life force, extended from ourselves, which may, yeah, be stern, but um if it is what it is that, obviously. But people also will be like, I was being lovely, but they had a vibration of anger with them. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, a resistance, a resistance to the moment, like um which is a disconnection from God, because God is the creator. So it's like, are you um open to what's being created in the moment? Are you open to the creation of the moment? And if you're
Mm.
open to the creation of the moment, then I don't know. Anger is interesting because it's hard to know what someone's feeling internally.
Yeah, that's the point
Like,
I'm trying to
like
make.
I'd have people tell me like, you're angry, and I'm like, I don't feel angry.
Right, right,
know, I'm just passionate in
right.
this moment. But so it's hard to say like what. I think you only know inside yourself if you're, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes if you're not aware, you don't even know that, right? So
Well,
I guess
that's the
what I'm
most
saying is it's,
important point, in terms of self-honesty, in terms of coming from love always, because we're, the one, I guess the Holy Spirit and ourselves are like the inner awareness,
Mhm.
of where we're truly coming from, and being honest, being forgiveness when we are not coming from love, I suppose, if we intend to come from love.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
Just a little add something on that. Something I use as a gauge in my own personal experience to kind of discern where something is coming from within myself, or where a reaction is coming from within myself, or to, I don't know, just kind of vet that the emotion is aligning with that deeper feeling of love, is the openness that it comes with. So when you said that with the open, Brian, I was like, oh yeah, oh yeah, because like I think that the whenever we're like closed and restricted to the connection, the other person, the emotions there, that's what creates a lot of the negative tensions and a lot of like perpetuating that disconnection, and I think that
Mhm.
you can be angry and open-hearted. I think you can be sad and open-hearted. I think you can be heartbroken and open-hearted, so
Mhm.
just that feeling of like and I don't know exactly how you would define that outside of the sensation within the body,
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's something that came up when we talking.
yeah. I think I've heard the term righteous anger, which I think is a real thing, you know. But you reminded me of my friend Dale Allen Hoffman. Some of you know him, and I remember him saying it's just about being wide open. That was his phrase for how to live this journey. And basically, it's like, if you're like, the more you open, if you think of like, God is the infinite, so the more the ego is the illusionary sense of a separate self, right? So the more you open, you're opening wider and wider and wider, then the more you're like, I'm opening my hands, right? It's almost like you're embracing the infinite, which is God, more and more and more until you're unified. And that's the transcendence of suffering. Like, this unification with God is the transcendence. Um, so I agree. It does feel like it's like an opening, right? So it's like the heart's opening more and more and more, the mind's opening more and more, the physical body is opening more and more and more. It's really interesting, you know. I was talking about something earlier today, of like, when the body is really tight and constricted, the light can't get in, and nothing can get out. So it's like there's just like this compression, and then you feel that's where physical pain comes. Physical pain, chronic physical pain, again, right? Chronic physical pain comes from chronic restriction and constriction in the body and tightness in the body. And so sometimes I think the word holy, sometimes I think of it as your body, someone who's a holy person, their body is opening more and more and more. So it's like you can like there's literally almost like holes in their body where the light can shine in and shine out. Like they're more almost like transparent. Um, where someone who's not holy is very dense, very compact, very tight, you know. But the more someone awakens, it's like literally like sometimes like I see holes and like the light is just shining out. So this term I use the big glow. It's like there's like this light that is inside all of us. We all are the divine light. But the more we open our hearts, the more we open our minds, the more we open our bodies, and the more we can shine the light and receive the light, right? Thoughts on that, Will?
Just loving it. That's a great metaphor of the holy. It reminded me of some of the Eastern poets be like a I'm the hollow flute that Christ plays his music through. But yeah,
Say that
it
again.
also I think I don't know who said it, but something like I'm the flute that Christ plays his music through.
Wow, I love that. That's amazing.
Hmm. It's beautiful. Yeah, it was probably Rumi, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's cool how someone even in the East could have that same experience, because to me that's just beautiful, suggesting like the one truth,
Exactly.
one being around the
Exactly.
entire universe, and something we can
Exactly.
all connect over, which I see, yeah, it's happening
Exactly.
from here to Taboo or Tobo, where
I
you're
do
from.
feel like there is one truth, and we are that truth, but we forget it all the time. And or we're a part of that truth, is maybe a better way of saying it. And there's all kinds of different like terminology and words and metaphors and imagery and ideology and dogma to try to articulate this truth. And if you're just on the surface of the mind, this creates a lot of like conflict and war and arguing and fighting because it's like, no, it's not my words, my word, not your word. The way I use the word, not the word you use. And this is even among Christians, all the different denominations. There's all this fighting, and it's like,
Well, all that's just masking what the egoic self is doing against
yeah. But if you're in the mind, it seems very real.
it.
You know,
Yes,
it seems very real, and it seems like
right,
it's worth fighting over. Um,
right.
And I've mentioned here before, there's people that don't like certain words that I use, and why don't you use this word instead of that word? Why do you use the word God? Why do all this kind of stuff, right? And there's reasons behind it, and people have their experiences, and they have, you know, a word was used in a certain way that created a certain trigger or trauma. So I get all that, but the point is that like it's not about the word. So it's like it's this crazy fun thing in this life where we're using all these words to communicate something that's not in words at all. It's it's
Hmm.
it's behind the words, and
Hmm.
and I think it's just important to recognize that here is that we're 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 pointing at something that's like beyond words, thoughts, concepts, ideas. Um, people use the word non-duality, which is like it's a unified field. It's not non-duality literally means not two, right? So as soon as you go like, oh, there it is, then
Hmm.
it's not that because you're creating a division and a separation.
Hmm.
And words do that by their nature. Their words are they're breaking things down into pieces. But what we're
Very
talking
much so.
about is beyond pieces.
It's wholeness,
It's wholeness.
unbroken, total, complete.
Yeah. But then if you say wholeness, then someone goes like, oh, how do I become wholeness? And it's like there's what's the opposite of wholeness? That's not wholeness. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, to me, to be human, we're very much in a process of experiencing ourselves as not necessarily whole. So, it's just the human process of the mind being able to ask that question and then the spirit answering it.
Yeah, but it's like whatever I see or think about or feel
Mm-hmm.
um, or hear is not whole and at the same time is whole,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about a piece of something or a part of something, even what I see visually. Like I'm like obviously I can't see the whole thing, I
Mm-hmm.
only see where I'm looking.
Right.
But it's like there's this kind of deeper awareness that even though I'm thinking about part of it and I'm seeing part of it, I'm part of all of it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's part of all of me,
Mm-hmm.
and you're part of all of it,
Mm.
and we're part of the same truth, the same
Same.
essence.
Truth. Yeah. The
And
same
that,
being.
and this is the same being. Yeah, I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
then this is the true love.
Mm.
It's like very natural
Right.
because like
Recognizing. Mm-hmm.
because it's like the more you awaken this consciousness, like when I look at you and I look in your eyes, I'm seeing myself,
Mm.
which is why Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Like that's the true reason, because that's the truth.
Right, because the truth is that God is whole and one, and that we're all a part of her, like
Yeah.
that she is one holy thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Mama. But yeah, that law reflects the truth. And people would say, why is that the law? The law like is there because that is what the truth is. The truth is we are maybe one or shared on that deepest layer that you're describing. That's why what we do to another, we are doing to ourselves because we are literally all that one or ultimately, connected to it. It's just beautiful. And we find it by sharing it with each other, which is also a beautiful teaching. And the more that you appreciate it in each other, the more that it's also recognized again and remembered within.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all different reflections of the one divine essence, and we're here, but we're all unique reflections. So we're here to learn and grow and evolve and awaken through relating with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we frustrate each other and upset each other, and that's all part of the love.
The love that I'm learning about that I need for myself, because what lack I'm perceiving in another is where I'm learning to forgive myself ever more deeply and take the burden off of them, but give it back to God that He may supply endless loves, that the great pains of being a human may be relieved.
Nice. Yeah, forgiveness is a I think of it as a technology. Like it's like one of the most powerful technologies to maybe the most to, and I think that's why Jesus puts so much emphasis on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is because it takes you to the essence of what we're talking about, to the
Mm-hmm.
to the divine unified field of love.
Indeed. Mm-hmm.
But
I
I
agree.
think where it gets tricky is it doesn't mean that there's no accountability, right? So that's where it gets like a little, well, there's a lot of places where it gets tricky, but that's one place where it
I
gets
mean,
tricky.
maybe only humans could think that though, because we're still, like God is aware of all things. So, I mean, on the ultimate level, we're all bound to Him, right? And He knows everything that is done or whatnot. But yeah, I suppose people could hear that and then, yes, let it sort of exasperate unloving qualities, which, yes, I certainly have known myself to experience that temptation. It's
Hmm.
just, oh, God will forgive everything eventually, so we don't need to worry about it right now. Which is just prolonging our own suffering, but who amongst us isn't necessarily aware of that? So I like what Annie just said.
Oh, I've been missing the,
She said to forgive is to return back home to unification with God, which I think is the ultimate technology of forgiveness, because I really found I need to forgive myself for, all the ways that I've been wrapped up in duality and in challenging situations that, ultimately that, it's a paradigm that I'm familiar with. And so I think it's a wonderful tool to sort of release that habitual, energy, however long we've been dancing and engrossed in certain perceptions or whatnot. But and forgiveness sets it free. But you're right, forgiveness with accountability, which is just, support for change, new environment, new community, new vibes.
sorry, I was missing the
Really,
chat, guys. I'm just catching up on everything now. Been a lot to navigate here, but thanks for sharing. To forgive is to return back home to unification with God. Yeah. Yeah, because you know why? Because, okay, this is going to be deep. Someone in here, I won't say who they are, told me not to, they don't like it when I go too deep. But I can't resist. So, when you get caught in time, when you get caught in the realm of time and space, linear time and space, and that's all that you're aware of, then you lose the connection with God, because God is the timeless presence, the timeless loving presence at the heart of all creation. So it's like God is that which is not bound within time and space. So how do we realize that we're not bound by time or space either? This is go back to the question of how to transcend suffering, right? How do we realize that we're not bound by time or space either? And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to forgive, because when you, let's take it the other way, when you don't forgive, then there's time is like built up inside you. You're holding on to things from the past, right? So by you holding on to things from the past, you're bound and constricted within time and space. Is this making sense so far, Will?
Yes, yeah, you're going in a good place.
Okay.
The God's eternal touch sets free a lot.
Imagine that you could forgive everything instantly. If you forgive everything instantly, as long as it would happen, boom, boom, forgive, 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 forgive. That's why Jesus says, like, forgive 7 times 77, which isn't obviously literal, but like basically and infinitely forgive, right? Because like if you forgive, 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 as soon as it happens, then you're not in the realm of time, because you're just nothing is accumulating inside you. So you're liberated from time. It's like you're in the world, but you're not of it. So you're liberated from the world, but you're still participating in it as a loving presence.
That sounds like transcending suffering, in terms of working through each of those things that snagged up your mind and would hold you in the past, or cause like internal conflict, self-doubt. As we forgive those things, then the mind becomes more and more clear and present until, yeah, there's, nothing holding you back, which is beautiful. I think that is a natural state. That sounds lovely.
Then says forgiving is like letting go. It's easier to do when you also figure out that you don't have to keep enduring abusive situations. Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like forgiving. Forgiveness is such a fascinating thing. It's again, it's like love. It's like there's deeper and deeper levels to it and layers and understanding of it. But I think forgiving someone actually can remove you from the abusive situation. Like the idea is like, oh, it'll keep me stuck in the abusive situation. But I actually think if you forgive in the true deepest way that we're talking about, you'll be like, I have no karma with you anymore. You know, to use an Eastern term, right? Like I have no karma. Like I forgive you and see ya.
It is,
Yep.
yeah, that's scientific in terms of, and people know that it's important to forgive the emotion that's being caused in order to release the situation, but that can be really challenging to do in the face of the situation
For
because the
sure.
way that trauma bonds are are wrapped. But I just, yeah, I mean, it's a path of grace to have everybody imagine non-abusive situations that we don't need to use those challenging lessons to wake up. We can imagine loving situations, gentle lessons to move us into whatever state of grace that God would have for us. But yeah, it's tough to reflect on. I mean, it is. You said Earth is not an easy school, and I mean that I feel so much compassion just for anybody walking this path because yeah, it takes working through a lot of different elements of what has been the collective consciousness, and some of those elements are really shadow and challenging, sticky, dark and images of death and all these things, these really scary or seem that way in time and with mortality without God. So that's why I also think returning to that point of being able to access spirit in the moment is really where that's where healing returns to. That's where our home is, and that's what we seek through forgiveness, is just return to our state of peace, as God would have us be, peaceful, happy in existence, attracting the situations that reflect our soul, and the loving ways and such. But it's beautiful to witness it happening. I would say you were talking about having a purpose earlier, and transcending suffering. A friend of mine was saying to me today is the purpose that he has for living, that like waking up, that God gives us like a mission to, if there are souls that are suffering, they're part of us, and if our soul's suffering, we're part of other people. And it's like our collective, like it could be a purpose, or I think it's a natural one to bring, the light of healing to all of us. Because, if God is embracing all things and love has no opposite, then it would be a strange state to be in God, but not be experiencing his love. I know I've experienced that. So it brings home the, sincerity for the need for healing, which I think is probably the primary quality for accessing it, is, earnestly asking for it, but it's a beautiful conversation. One that I think is a technology, emotionally and mentally and spiritually, for being able to let go and move past challenges when they arrive. And they will if we want to go deeper, because there's a lot to learn about. I mean, I don't know. Y'all know.
Beautiful, Will. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else have a question or a comment or anything that they'd like to reflect on?
I'd like to share something in response to all that. This is great. So to kind of bring what we were just talking about, circling it into the holiness comment with all the holes.
All the holes,
and also
yep.
the flute. I liked that quote as well. I think that a quote that came to mind that I think is also Rumi, is the wound is where the light gets in.
Yeah.
And through that lens, I'd like to bring up, like, because we're talking about this letting go type of thing whenever we encounter strifes or difficulties or emotional challenges, and kind of not being attached to that, which I think on the deeper levels, like with the layers of the ocean, very appropriate. However, I do think that being with the waves is also a very profound teacher of how to deepen that presence. I don't know exactly, it's a little metaphorical, but y'all know. So
Being with the
Totally.
waves, like the waves of like emotions and the waves of things happening,
Storms.
storms. Is that what you
The
mean?
suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean the suffering, Kissney?
I do. I mean the pain rather, if we're trying to split those definitions. That being with the pain or being with the wounds as they come up is there's something in there. Or like even if we're reflecting on what someone brought up, let me scan for faces. I'm still getting familiar. I don't think they're on here anymore, but they were talking about Jesus's journey.
Yeah.
And how he cried for his friend and was in the emotional experience.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to separate ourselves from those waves to have the deeper, how do I say, like identify with the depth.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, I don't think there can be any separation from anything. Like if there's separation, it's not alignment with the truth.
So
It needs to be a consciousness of no separation. So what I found so powerful for me on my personal journey with Jesus as a teacher was exactly that. It was like, oh, this guy is like with the pain fully. He's not trying to get away from it at all, you know? So that was very powerful for me to see that model of a human being who's like fully with the pain, fully with the people, fully with his purpose, fully with all the mud, the grit, the dirt of life, and completely beyond it at the same time. That's my view of like, some of you will appreciate this. My friend Michael Parisi, to me, this is one of the greatest lines I ever heard. Some of you won't make any sense, but some of you will get it. He said that Jesus is the real Tantra because Jesus merges the physical and the spiritual perfectly, right? So Tantra is the practice of like embodying, of embracing the world, embracing the senses, embracing, from the Eastern tradition, from India. And it's like Jesus is the real Tantra because Jesus is this marriage of spirit and flesh, where it's like there's no avoidance of the flesh, there's no avoidance of the world, there's no avoidance of the waves, as you were saying, Kisney, but also there's the complete transcendence of all of it at the same time. So I think that second part is also important because people forget that part. Because if you're just in it, but you don't realize you're also beyond it, then you can't really be in it. And with all of the openness that you bring to the space. So that unification is the key.
yeah,
Beautifully said.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I feel like that's like my personal journey was experiencing all those waves, all that suffering, and then transcending that. It's kind of, I think I maybe mentioned it last week, like it was God's plan all along, like for me to go into that suffering, for me to transcend that suffering, and then realize it was God. And I think, there's a lot of people suffering. There's a lot of people that suffer. And I think if we can share, like, illuminate the way out, like to transcend that suffering, then other people's suffering can realize that suffering was part of them finding God and finding transcendence.
That just kind of reminded me that suffering, like in a way, could be seen as like love purifying us.
A blessing.
That's like
a blessing.
A blessing, but like if we're like meant to return back to heaven, it's like when I've suffered, it's when I've felt like I have wronged somebody or wronged God, or like, we have deep ideas that are bound to our suffering and experiences also that we cause. But like all that is like purified my soul to be like, how am I showing up? How am I creating? Like what is coming out of me? How am I using my energy? So it's amazing the way it works too. So there's almost a side of it too, where it's like, it's like by going into it and allowing ourselves to do it, embrace it, then we are getting purified in the way that I think God wants us to be, which is like, extending love perfectly and shining our souls. It's an
Yeah.
interesting, but yeah, it can be seen as love as well. But I feel you on that. And yeah, I feel your gratitude to be like in a place of release in the moment. It's beautiful.
And then tying that back into forgiveness, um, if let's see, oh man, I lost my train of thought.
Let me bounce
Apologies.
something back off you, Jacob, for a moment. So
Yeah,
one important piece to put in about like helping people, because you and I have been talking about this, right? Like helping people who are suffering is help people. This is very important. Help people that want to be helped, and don't help people that don't want to be helped. This is very key. There's a lot of energy, and I think a lot of times it's ego. There's something for our own gratification. We want this person to change, so let me go help this person. They don't want your help, and then there's other people that really need your help and want it, but you're not giving them the help because you're so focused on this one person that doesn't want it. So I think that's a really key thing to be mindful of, is helping people. And that's something you can see with Jesus as well. Like, I know there's this one part where he went back to his hometown and he's like, shake the dust from your feet. They didn't want my help. So, okay, I go to people that want my help, which is interesting too, because a lot of times the people who think they really know you, like they have their fixed image of you, they can't see who you really are. Right. Which was what
yeah,
happened to him in that situation.
Mhm.
yeah. Your past is tied to their view.
Exactly. Exactly. And even
Um,
even with him, that was the case.
and then tying, so the forgiveness part came back to me. So tying this back into forgiveness is, I think for me personally, my goal is to come to a place where I don't I don't want to need forgiveness. I want to come from a place that is pure and that is love. So I'm like very intentional about my actions and reactions and how I'm showing up in those moments of anger and in those frustrations, to not react in a way that needs forgiveness.
Mhm.
So I think, are you thinking of it as forgiveness from someone else?
Yes, from someone else to me. So, or forgiving myself, or from God. Like Will mentioned, like, forgiveness, maybe, at some points we've thought that, well, yeah, I can do that because all sins are forgiven in the end. But I think once, like for me, in my experience, I want to show up where I don't need to be forgiven. Does that make sense? Like I want to show up in my best.
Totally.
Okay, this is good stuff. Let's break down. Okay, so there's other people's forgiveness, there's your own self-forgiveness, there's you forgiving someone else, and then there's God's forgiveness of you. So there's, what was that, four or five, Will?
Or, yeah,
Four. So there's four different aspects of forgiveness. So I would say, to me, what you're talking about is the least important of all of those, because you don't really have control over it.
right.
So whether somebody else forgives, I mean, obviously it's nice if people forgive you, but it's not something you have control over. So because of that, I would say that's like the least important one. Um, some people it's more important than others, though, right? Like if your wife's mad at you or something, then we might want to work on that. But
Big prayers.
yeah, but self-forgiveness is one that a lot of people. This is interesting for me, like in the work that I do. What I've learned is like a lot of people, the biggest area, they don't forgive themselves. And there's a lot of pain and suffering there about things that they've done in the past, and
Hmm.
self-loathing and self-hatred and
Hmm.
um, self kind of like what would you call it, like being abusive to how you talk to yourself.
Mhm.
because of things that have happened in the past. And so I think self-forgiveness is a really big one. And actually, the more that you forgive yourself, you'll naturally forgive everybody else because everybody else is a reflection of you,
Mhm.
right? Um, so particularly like if there's a certain thing that you haven't forgiven in yourself, you'll project it onto everybody else and you'll hate that part of everyone else. But actually you need to forgive that part of yourself, you know? So that
Mhm.
that that
Mhm.
kind of takes care of the forgiveness of other people, generally. I mean, that's kind of a root cause of it. And then the last one of like for God, um, Jesus, you're already forgiven. Like I think that that's clear from Jesus's teaching. It's like you're already forgiven. You're immediately forgiven. Like God loves you always, like immensely, you know, no matter what we do, we're always forgiven and we're always loved. And it's like that thing that I say a lot is God is always available. You know, the only question is, are we available? So like God is always available to love us. And then it's just a matter, are we available to love God back? You know, and so often we're not available because of the very things I just said. We're not available because we think we're not worthy of the love. It's really amazing to look at it.
Mm.
It's like we don't feel like we're worthy of the love or deserving of it, or we did so many bad things, and God's like, well, I love you anyway. I don't, it's okay. And it's like, no, it's not okay, you know? And then we
Accept
like,
it.
yeah, like one of the most beautiful stories in the Bible is the story of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I don't know if I'll be able to tell it exactly right, so I don't know if I go into the whole thing, but basically there's two sons, and the one son is a good son, the other son's a very bad son, and he goes out and he's like gambling and going to brothels and blowing all his money and doing all kinds of, sinful things. And then he like runs out of money and he's like living, in some kind of wretched situation. And he's like, I got to go back home to my father. And my father's going to be so mad at me and he's going to punish me. And he goes back home and his father's like, oh, so happy to see you. Let's make the biggest feast and um, you know, give him the finest clothes and um and then the other son's like, why are you treating him so nicely? He did all these terrible things, and the father's like, basically, I'm just celebrating that my son is back home. That it doesn't matter what he did, is basically the way, to kind of shorten the story, right? But it's interesting because the other son has some jealousy because he's like, I did everything right, and now you're why are you treating him as good as me, you know? And it's like, because you're both you're both the children of God, so I treat you both with love, and I welcome you both always. So
Beautiful.
it's like the father was always there with the love, but the son wasn't there. But once the son came back, the father was still there with the love. Like the love is ever present. We're the ones that are
Mm.
running away from it, and running back to it, and running away from it, and running back to it. And we want to try it our own way. We want to do it our own way. And we think we have a better way of doing it. And then when we come back, it's like, oh, the love is there. It never left. It's a timeless presence. You want to have anything else they want to share?
That kind of reminds me of the idea of like forgiving myself for changing my idea of myself. Like I changed my identity, so I perceive myself as mortal. And so there's a process of forgiving those beliefs, perceptions, attachments, and releasing that identity and returning to like the identity of spirit, like
Exactly.
which maybe the Father intended for us, like that He made us as perfect love, eternal, shining, creative, and one with Him in all things. But it's like I forgive myself for choosing that identity, milking it, really having a good human trip, doing it all, getting nice and yeah, and then and now I release it and return to what has never changed
Yeah,
and
that
is
that's
with
such a
you.
great point because there's like this idea of like um, man, this is so radical. It's like there's a sense of like, because in our world, it's all about punishment. You
Right.
know, you
No,
sinned,
it was just
you
it was
did
a
something
simple
wrong.
choice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now you need to be punished.
Right. No,
Um, but the forgiveness is like the technology that transcends that wheel of karma. Does that make
true.
sense?
Truly,
Hmm.
yes, I feel it. Where it wasn't that it was wrong, it was a simple choice made from an egoic mind, which is inherently limited and has certain consequences, that was not sinful. It doesn't reflect the truth that the Father intends for us as spirit. So it's just a simple choice to use, the mind in a new way, from being like fixed on the identity that I, chose as like immortal, as an ego, to like the Holy Spirit's like spacious, um, forgiven, free, shining identity,
Hmm.
whatever,
Beautiful.
that return. Yeah, it's simple. It's because it's not a punishment, though the ego fears that and projects it out, onto God, but that's not God. God's just like, nah, bro, I know you want to come back.
Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if anybody has any stories of transcending suffering recently that they'd like to share.
That's a good
It's always
question.
kind of fun to hear people putting it into practice and seeing
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening.
Does anybody have any recent stories of transcending suffering?
Hi guys.
Hey, Darian.
Hi.
Welcome. So glad you're back.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. And since Robin asked the question, I'm like, yeah, I do have something to share. Um, so, suffering is when we are experiencing something that is, I guess, unpleasant or uncomfortable, right? And um life recently has been a complete 180 in like lack of um having control over my life that I once used to, or an idea of what a future will look like. Hence, or for example, like where I'm living and things with so much of life is so unknown right now. And the thing that's been getting me through the most, all of this, uncomfortability, potential, real potential suffering, right? Like some real unknowns. And what's been getting me through is just to consistently thank God for working for me and not to me. Like, thank you for all of this happening for
Mm-hmm.
me, not to me. I'm not a victim, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
suffering is a choice. And I don't have it down completely. I've had days where I, it's challenging to fully believe it. Or even though I did believe it, the mind, the ego, our stories, like they matter, they're real emotions. But we really do have the choice to choose what we believe. And in a way, the fact that all this change is so dramatic and grand scale, like in my personal life, it's almost easier to surrender. Like the suffering could potentially be so large and so grand, you could really spiral. or
Mm-hmm.
or you say, that sounds really messy and I can do better than that. So you just choose to give it to God and you choose to trust God. And I'm telling you, it works. And yeah, just plugging into other people who also believe that, and who can encourage you and like remind you when you're feeling the stories and the attachments to what we know, what we think we know is, yeah, yeah. We always have a choice. And I guess that's the point of all of this. Yeah. To choose to suffer or to choose another way. And it's always, it may seem out of reach, but it's always possible. Yeah. That's my little blip.
Yeah, that kind of is the the formula for in general, right? It's like I love how you framed it though. I hadn't heard said quite that way before. Like this is happening. Well, I guess I have, but I've heard a little different way you said it. Like this is happening for me, not to me. Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. Like there's bigger things at work here. God's potential,
right,
will is happening for me,
right,
out of
right,
my hands.
right. Even when it seems like it's not to your mind.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. The mind wants to do all these other things with it, but you just got to go back to truth.
That's why I was talking about the humility component because
Yeah.
I was listening to this very interesting little. I wasn't even intending to. It just kind of popped up on my YouTube, and it was this. And some of you know Jordan Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson. He was talking, and he was saying that people who are intelligent um, are really gifted in a lot of different ways. Like they studies show that they do better financially, and job status, and all these kinds of things, right? Um, but he said that they they have the capability of thinking that they can understand it through their mind. Like they can understand the way things are supposed to go through their mind. And that creates a lot of suffering for them. And also, I think he used the term like immorality or like that, basically, like that can disconnect them from God because they think, like, oh, I'm God because I'm so smart. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
smart. I don't need God. I'm God. I know how it's supposed to go. And so then, but I think this does happen in our world, right? Like in our
Absolutely. Yeah.
society, in our culture, right? So then,
Absolutely.
I think that path, and I think that there's been times in my life where I got cocky, right? Maybe you guys can relate. And then you're kind of like sort of brought to your knees of like, oh, I actually don't know. I can't do it all myself. I'm actually not all knowing,
Mhm.
So then it's like you can have that sense through that humility, your mind just opens and you're just like um in the sense of like I see, I think faith isn't strong enough. I'm thinking the word faith, but I don't think it's faith is fine, it's good, but I think there's something deeper than faith, where there is kind of a knowing that this is happening for me, even when it looks bad in the moment,
I
you know?
really think it's a belief. Like you have to truly believe it.
Because
It's deeper.
remember, like one of the first things I talked about is like this realization that there is a loving presence at the heart of creation, right? So like to really realize that. So if you really realize that there's a loving presence at the heart of creation, really realize it, like really, really know it, like really know it. Not that, oh, I have faith, maybe, maybe not, I have faith. That's a good starting point, but like you really, you know it, like you know that there's a tree over there, like that kind of knowing. Um,
Yes.
so if you know it like that, then everything is happening for you. That's because the loving presence, it's not a hateful presence, it's a loving presence, right? So
Yes.
everything actually is happening for you. Um,
Mm.
even when it looks like it's not. And then you just kind of like relax into that. And the more that you relax into it, then the more the miracles start to arise. Because now you're not resisting the thing that looks um, like you don't want it to look, but you're embracing it. So like, like I heard this story just as an example. Um, Somebody's driving, they're going to the airport, they get a flat tire, and they're so angry and they're like kicking the car and swearing and like total disconnection from this is happening for me mentality that you're sharing, right? Total disconnection from like God is working for me at all times. So they're like really pissed and yelling at people and like get back in the car and speed to the airport and find out that they missed the plane and they're really upset and angry and they find out that the plane crashed,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like that sense of like trusting that things are working for me. Um, a lot of times we will see it and over time. We'll see, oh, now I see what that was happening for me, right? Anybody have an example of that? Of like you thought something was like against you, but then it turns out later you look back, maybe it's years later, and you're like, oh, that actually is happening for me. That I'm so grateful that happened and that benefited me.
There are so many instances where that's happened for me, in relationships, um, in yeah, I don't know. I can't really think of specifics other than like really like relationships, like ending, like and kind of the suffering that occurred in the endings of those relationships, but then later seeing and realizing that there's no way for me to be here without that ending. Also, I mean, really all along the journey, there's no way for me to be here. Like God was guiding it the whole time.
Mhm.
And everything was working out for me the whole time. Yeah.
Um,
I everything that is like a major jump in like spirit, like it's like so painful before, and then afterwards it's so amazing because you're in a totally different space, but it's like literally growing and transforming, you know?
And everything, if you're on this path of awakening, if you're on this path of opening to communion with God, then everything is a jump in spirit potentially. Every moment
Mm-hmm. Mm,
is an opportunity to
right.
jump in spirit.
yeah, it's like some of our biggest challenges and times of change and uncertainty can be these massive, catapults. And they don't not necessarily always are. And it's not necessarily an expectation, but um, it is way more pleasurable to entertain those thoughts of, you know, what's what's next in a good way, what's next in the exciting way than to entertain the thoughts of, lost or, the other side of the spectrum. And again,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a choice. And yeah, it's just and practicing it enough and seeing your life up until, this point of all the proof that, God's shown us up until this point that, God's got us and we really have all the proof we need. We've made it this far, all of us. It's yeah, it's a belief system for sure.
Mm.
Amen.
Amen.
I like that it's like a belief system that reflects the truth, which like we talk about like no thoughts or no mind, but like beliefs are like, I guess, thoughts that reflect like the laws of God and the truth of God, which that he does love you and she has always held us as long as we've existed. So I think that's like beautiful what you're saying in terms of, being aware that those are your beliefs that you're holding about your life. And then that's when they're actually reflected in the world, when those thoughts are held without, opposites that are like hidden below it, like saying contradictory things, then those things do show up. But it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. It works.
And that's what I
That's
love.
what they
That's
say. Jesus works.
well,
Yeah.
that's it. Like that's the for me, like that's the thing is like I'm very practical and pragmatic. Like it's like, does it work? You know, it's like, does it work? And I think what we're talking about tonight and what we've been talking about, it works. Um, so let's keep talking about it because it works.
It works.
Keep keep reminding each other. Um,
Yes.
okay, I think we'll wrap up. So much love and appreciation for all of you. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for all your wisdom and insights and vulnerability. And um, let's let's keep it going. We'll be here again next Thursday night, live at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can invite whoever you'd like to join us. And this has usually been coming out for the replay on Monday, so you can watch the replays before, or you can watch this one on Monday. Love you guys. Have a beautiful now.
Thank you, Brian, for doing this.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I
Thanks,
loved it.
Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Brian. Bye, Jacob.
Bye.